Welcome viewers. Today I'll be discussing about an overview of organizational theories. Uh, the classical, neoclassical and modern management theories are classified as type 1, type 2, type 3 and type 4 theories. They are distinct sequential eras of management thought. So, the discussion here would be how these theories have played an impact on organizations and the performance of organizations. First, to begin with, we will discuss about the classical management theory or classical or type 1 theories, which represents classical or type 1 theories representing early scientific and bureaucratic approaches. Neoclassical or type 2 theories emphasize on the importance of human relations in the workplace. And modern theories of management, like type 3 theories and type 4 theories, incorporating the systems, contingency, and management science perspectives to address complex changing business environments. The types of the types reflect the historical progression and evolution of management perspectives and thoughts, which with each emphasis, each phase, the types reflect the historical progression and evolution of management perspectives and thoughts, with each phase providing a comprehensive model for managing organizations. There are 8 metaphors of an organization. What is a metaphor? Metaphor is a perspective of the organizations. So, Gareth Morgan has described the images of organizations in terms of various metaphors. Gareth Morgan has proposed that organization is like a machine. So, what does a machine do? Like an interrelated parts which are arranged logically to get output. Organization is like a machine with various parts which are interrelated with each other, which help in organizational performance or getting the final output. Similarly, there is another metaphor which is called as an organism metaphor or anthropomorphizing organizations, which means that organizations are like a living being and it responds like a living being to its environment. So, the basic premise here is an organization is like an organism or a living being which adapts to the changes in the business environment. The third metaphor is organization is like a brain. Like what does a brain do? In what is the main function of a brain? Brain is like a learning mechanism. So, it helps in information processing and learning. Similarly, an organization also does information processing. It gathers information from external, internal environment and it also learns, adapts and changes accordingly. The fourth view is organization is a culture. How does a culture behave? Culture means shared beliefs, values, which are or the uh, perceptions which have been carried forward from one another. So, shared beliefs, values, stories, symbols, rituals, which are shared by individuals who are part and parcel of organizations. So, organization is also like a culture. The fifth viewpoint or the fifth perspective states that organization is like a political system with basis of power, politics, predominantly prevalent in the organization. So, organization there are people possessing power due to their authority, due to their reference power, due to their knowledge, experience, and who can change or influence the decision making in an organization. The sixth metaphor talks about organization as a psychic prison. So, which talks about the prisoners, people or organizations are prisoners of the myths, symbols, and stories. The history of an organization, the past performance, the past identity, image of an organization always binds or it is a barrier to change in the organization. It's like the organization is held in a prison. The seventh metaphor talks about organization is in a constant state of flux. Organization as a change and flux mechanism, which says that there is an ever changing system and environment, an organization has to evolve in a rapidly changing business environment. So it cannot remain very stringent or rigid, it has to be flexible. The eighth metaphor talks about an organization is an instrument of domination, or it adapts to environment. So these are various perspectives which have been highlighted by Gareth Morgan through his images of organizations. Machine metaphor talks about highlights efficient production through focus on inputs and output, organizational designs, routinized procedures, and it covers theories like classical management theory given by Henry Fayol, bureaucracy by Max Weber, and Frank and Lillian Galbraith, who talks about time and motion studies. The organism metaphor casts organization as a living system, focusing on the cycles, uh, species, ecology, birth, death, and adaptation. It talks about the various life cycle stages of an organization, which encompasses open systems theory, contingency theory, population ecology, and evolutionary theory of organizations. Then, further moving towards a brain metaphor, which centers on learning capacities of an organization, which says that an organization continuously learns and adapts based on the demands in external environment by emphasizing on the information processing capacity, cognitive functioning, right and left brain functions like in case of a human being. Similarly, organizations memory and images of the past, holographic images, they're all part of the brain metaphor of an organization. It embraces cybernetics, learning theories, and information processing theory. The culture metaphor underscores values, beliefs, symbols, norms, and shared meaning which have been shared by all individuals who are part of organization, and it treats organizations as accomplishments that are socially constructed, that are understood. The cultural perspective of organization is equally shared by all the individuals. That means it is socially constructed phenomena. Political systems metaphor aligns organizations with governance system, interest based needs, conflicts. It talks about conflicts, negotiations, gender, race, and power. People possessing power based on their knowledge, reference, experience, expertise, position, authority. So, those who have power, they can influence a group of subordinates, they can influence a group of people, and this will also have an impact on decision making. So, this metaphor draws on stakeholders' theories, control theories, resource dependency theory, theory of uncertainty, and boundary management perspectives. Psychic prison metaphor highlights unconscious and conscious thoughts, psychological states of mind, uh, anxiety, and defense mechanism, very similar to how an individual's id, ego, superego plays an important role in decision making. So it embraces the psychodynamics view of organizing. It talks about the Freudian's theory and paradoxes and traps. Like individuals are held up in biases because of their conscious and unconscious thoughts. Similarly, organizations are also held up in the prisons of the past. They are held up in the psychic prisons or traps which will hinder in decision making or which will hinder in their progress. So, flux and transformation metaphor accents power, flows, logics of change, circular patterns, and self production. It includes chaos and complexity theories. It talks about how an organization is always in a constant threat of change, and there are various external factors which may create a chaos in the business environment. So it also talks about causality, mutual causality, cause and effect relationship of various variables which which have a role to play in organizational performance, feedback loops, feedback mechanisms, and it also talks about the dialectical theories. Means there is always two force working in a dominant forces working in the organization. one would be supporting the change and the other would be an antithesis for change. So, it talks about dynamic forces working in the organization. Instruments of domination metaphor highlights exploitation, alienation, class systems or categories, and organizational control mechanisms, and it draws from the Marxist and critical theories. So, based on this discussion, we move forward about the characteristics which play an important role in defining the metaphors. So, machine metaphor talks about the organizations as machines of interlocking parts. It talks about the rules, it emphasizes on the rules, regulations in bureaucratic organizations. Organizations follow routines, efficiency, reliability, and predictability. Organism metaphor talks about organizations as living systems, environmental adaptation. These are certain keywords which emerge from the discussion about these metaphors. In the organism metaphor, there is different species of organizations. In the brain metaphor, organizations are considered as a learning system. The focus is on information processing in decision making and communication, and knowledge management and capacity for learning and developing. Culture metaphor talks about organizations as cultures. They are the dominant cultures, like where there is a shared perspective, shared values, beliefs, norms which are shared by individuals in a social community. It talks about social interaction and shared meanings of in organizational behavior, values, ideas, beliefs, norms, and rituals are shared by people working in a system. Political system, the dominant keywords are organizations at stages for political gaming and conflicting interest and the use of power to resolve conflicts. So, there is a conflict in the organization, and power plays an important role to solve the conflicts. People use power to influence other individuals in order to resolve the conflict which happens in the organization. Political dimensions of structure, technology, and strategies. The psychic prison metaphor, the keywords which have emerged, talks about organizations as in a mental prison, trapped by conscious and unconscious thoughts, ideas, and belief. There is a habitual thinking and rigid thought pattern prevailing in the organizations. The flux and transformation mechanism or metaphor highlights on the keywords of organization as self producing systems. There are forces of change which are shaping organizations in a permanent state of movement, and logic of change shaping the social life of an organization. Then, instruments of domination. Organizations as a state of slavery, organizations have hidden agendas of exploitative actions through use of power. There are people who possess power and who try to exploit or use resources based on the power they possess, based on the authority or influence they have. Class based sections, class based tensions, and oppression also prevails in organizations. We have learnt about various organizations where there is a disturbance or there is a classification based on management and the staff union. There is there is some kind of a tension which is always, or disagreement or oppression which is prevailing in the organizations. Keywords and themes as proposed by Gareth Morgan's analysis of metaphors in the context of organizational change. Machine metaphor, the dominant keywords are principles, control, mechanistic, machine like structure, classical theories, production mechanism, and the dominant themes are factors that influence organizational change, routinization, reliability, efficiency, control variables, then normative models and generic universal strategies. And in case of organism metaphor, the keywords are environment, system, relations, species, structure, need, and so on. The open systems. And there are certain themes which are very important, like organization needs, balance of needs, adaptation to external environment, surrounding environment, development, growth, survival, and evolution of organizations. Organizational relations are very important. The brain metaphor talks about keywords like learning, information, brains, systems, intelligence, and holographic images. The dominant themes here are knowledge, knowledge management, organizational learning, working in iteratively, learning through iterations, information processing in organizations, groups with specialized knowledge or knowledge concerns or knowledge centers. Knowledge of process areas is a key to success in organizational change. For culture metaphor, keywords are culture, values, people, life, reality, and social. The themes are rules, norms, ideas, and beliefs, motivation, values, and rituals in groups. Then, job or employee satisfaction and work environment, interorganizational behavior, and climate. For political system, power, control, political or politics, interest, and work. These are the keywords which have evolved, and the themes are interest and conflict between different groups, power relationship, patterns of influence. Psychic prison, the keywords are unconscious, then life, change. These are certain words which have emerged, reality, then humans, and the themes which have been covered in context of psychic prison, the, like freezing, locking of organizations by existing patterns or existing stories. Then organizational members unconsciously uh, they are trapped in their own minds, in their own, say, paradigm of success, thoughts, ideas, and belief. So, all these factors they hinder in the organization's adaptability to change or how they adapt to the new environment. Flux and transformation, it talks about certain keywords like change, systems, environment, patterns, context, and chaos. So the themes which have evolved in the discussion on flux as a mechanism, flux and transformation mechanism, or flux and transformation view of organization. So logics of change. Then it talks about logics of change shaping social life, the constant dynamic involvement within and beyond the organization, uncontrollable or chaotic organizational change. Information, instrument of domination or power, domination, labor, work or worker, power, interest, and control are the keywords which have dominated in the discussion on metaphors of instruments of domination. And the themes which have emerged, it focuses on exploitative and negative aspects of corporate life. Mostly it talks about organizations that use employees, uh, host communities, and the world economy to obtain goods by use of power and domination. The focus is on exploitative and negative aspects of corporate life. Organizations that use employees, host communities, and the world economy to obtain goals by use of power, by use of authority and domination. So, based on the understanding of different metaphors of an organization as proposed by Gareth Morgan, so the organization, these metaphors basically enable comprehensive understanding of an organizations. Why do we need to discuss about the metaphors? Every individual has a different way of interpretation about the organizational reality. Morgan's viewpoint or Morgan's metaphor has given us to think how the organization is like. Organization based on the analysis of eight different dimensions or eight different views or metaphors, we have understood now organization is like a living being, organization is like a system, organization is like a brain or a culture, or it has a power and politics or political system. So, these are certain ways to interpret or analyze an organization and its environment. So, what we have seen is the employers and employees They have focused on the unconscious or the psychic presence, the worker management issue or labor management issue. So the management is having exercising domination or is using the basis of power to or power or authority to control, to exercise control over employees. Employees understand that the management is trapped in the success of the past. They have some kind of biases against the workers. So, because of which they are not able to change their views. So, all these have helped in understanding the labor management relationship, union and management relationship. So, these perspectives have helped in solving organizational problems. Then moving forward, as we have seen that there is a change in the industry. Industry is moving from industry 1.0 to industry 5.0. Industry 1.0 talks about steam power, mechanical power. Industry 2.0 talks about the power of electrical energy. Industry 3.0 talks about how automation has transformed the organization and it has improved the performance or efficiency of organization. Industry 4.0 talks about data analysis. It talks about big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Industry 5.0 talks about the information processing and the speed of decision making based on the cyber physical systems, how wired technology, network technology has helped in analyzing, taking or real time decision making. So, there is a sea change in the business environment. And if the organization is not able to adapt to the business environment, it will not be sustainable. So, therefore, we need to understand the dynamics and the interaction of various metaphors in understanding our organizations in the context of its performance and effectiveness. So, there is a shared meaning or culture, flow of information or brain metaphor, and then adaptation to business environment like organism metaphor, and defined processes or machine metaphor, how the inputs are transformed into output that that gives you an overview of a systems metaphor. So, the definition of various metaphors or the interpretation of metaphors is very important to understand how an organization performs in a situation of constant flux or transformation. Exploring Morgan's metaphor of organizations, first we understand the generic structure based on Morgan's metaphor, machine metaphor, organism metaphor, flux and transformation, brain metaphor, culture, psychic prison, political systems, and instruments of domination has helped in moving forward with the development of blend based on characteristics of organizations. And the third step, we move towards development of emergent meaning of how a sustainable organization is being formed. So, machine metaphor talks about structure of interlocking parts, organism metaphor talks about organizations coping with external environment, flux and transformation talks about logic of change for ongoing recreation or ongoing transformation. Brain metaphor talks about effective problem solving and learning, and culture metaphor talks about socially constructed realities based on communication and cognition. The thought process keeps on changing, transforming. There is a shared values, beliefs, norms which are shared by individuals, and it talks about the culture metaphor. Psychic prison talks about socially constructed realities based on unconscious thought process, unconscious preoccupations of an individual. Political system, cooperation mechanisms and power plays an important role, and instruments of domination, it talks about exploitation, exploitative mechanism to achieve end results or goals. The development of the blend based on characteristics of organizations, where the focus is on sensing the environment. These metaphors have explained how the organization functions. The flux and transformation and organism metaphors help an individual understand or discuss the problems, challenges within people outside the organizations, like what is the information given by suppliers or customers during daily work. We often communicate with the people who are not employed in the same organizations, but we also need to sense make what is the environment's demand, what is the demand of the customers, the changing preferences of customers, and their ever increasing changes in the technology. So we need to organizations need to sense make out of the external environment. How this knowledge is, how the information can be transformed into knowledge, usually learning from other people during your day to day interaction, reconfiguring routines. So, based on the understanding or based on the knowledge which you have gathered from the external environment, we need to reconfigure our existing routines. Like team has challenges at using experiences of others in the project, how we can incorporate the knowledge to transform or change, making changes in the products. The management inspires employees to solve the problems, the challenges in new ways by acquiring the information through sensing the environment, by acquiring knowledge from the external environment. This will help an organization to perform. So, brain mechanism, or how the brain works by using as a organization as a learning system, information processing and gathering, flux and transformation, because they have procured the information from an ever changing business environment, and the organization adapts to the changes, adapts to change like a living being. So emerging implications for organization is organization like context of organizing that has the capability to self inspire and transform through brain oriented routines of evaluation, problem solving. All this learning helps an organization to learn, adapt and change as a brain, or the brain functions make sense of external stimulus, the stimulus which is coming from external environment, from the internal environment, sharing information across all the units to learn and adapt like a organism, while being self critical about its own achievement and which has already been accomplished. So all this helps uh, in an organization to transform, to adapt and to be sustainable. Now, moving forward with the evolution of organizational theory. There are few underlying dimensions or metaphors in the evolution of organizational theory. Organization as a system, as an autonomous system, and sealed from their environment. As a rational perspective, structure of an organization is conceived as a vehicle to achieve specified objectives. Social perspective emphasizes the structure is primarily the result of conflicting forces by organizations' constituents who seek power and control. The outcome of these perspectives or metaphors led to classifying organizational theory under four types. What are those four types? When we classify an organization, we see that organization has different theories, out of which classical theories like the scientific management, which emphasizes on efficient task performance, bureaucratic model talks about authority and structures, and administrative theory talks about universal management principles. Then there is a management science perspective, talks about economics, technical rationality, then human relations, and which emphasizes on behavioral theory, psychology, sociology, etc. And contingency theory, which talks about the factors in the environment, which also influences both in the specific and general environment, task environment, and the factors in the general environment like political, economic, socio-demographic factors, and legislative uh, legislations which have an influence on the organization and its performance. The task environment talks about the the competitors, the new entrants, the suppliers, the customers. They have influenced the organization. So contemporary approaches talks about the new management theories and how they have influenced an organization. So we will be discussing about the evolution of contemporary organizations theory, which have spanned over 1900s to 1975 and onwards, and till date there is a evolution of organizational theory. Let us focus on the various theories, theoretical classifications. Type 1 theories, the evolution of contemporary organizational theories. So, to move forward with the theoretical classification of type 1, type 2, and type 3 and type 4 theories. Type 1 theories have taken a perspective of closed systems approach, and their end perspective is rational approach to decision making, and central theme is mechanical efficiency. Type 2 theories talk about neoclassical theory, which also have a view of organization as a closed system, and their end perspective is, their perspective or viewpoint is, organization is like a social reality. They emphasize on people and human relations. Their focus central theme is people and human relations. The type 3 theories, which have almost evolved during the 1960s to 75, they take a viewpoint of organization as an open system, and their focus is organization is like a rational process which works on logics and facts, and the central theme is contingency designs. It emphasizes on the external factors and its influence on organization. So mostly the type 3 theories emphasize on organization environment theory. 1975 onwards, the focus is on management science perspectives. They emphasize on the central theme of power and politics. Their end perspective is social aspects of an organization. Organization is like a social reality, and the systems, they consider organization as a open system. So type 1 theories have dominated during the time period of 1900s to 1930s. Type 2 theories have dominated during the period of 1930s to 1960s, which is called the neoclassical era of management. Type 3 theories, which is part of the modern management theory or organization environment theory, which specifically existed during the 1960s to 75, and type 4 theories have evolved since 1975 onwards. So type 1 theories, the focus is on classical management, and their time period is 1900s to 1930s. The focus is on organizational structure, efficiency and productivity. Their perspective is organization is like a machine metaphor, and the sub theories which have existed during this era is scientific management, which emphasized towards improving worker efficiency through scientific management methods, emphasized on the most important contribution of time and motion studies, which have been given by Frank and Lillian Galbraith, and task standardization, which is proposed by Frederick Winslow Taylor. Bureaucracy is a concept which has been advocated for formal structures, rules, theory of authority structures and relations, hierarchy, and impersonality, proposed by Max Weber, and administrative management perspective, which came as a contribution of Henry Fayol, developed principles of organizing work, division of labor, management functions, and it talks about the 14 principles of management guiding organizations to set up an organization and its structure. The type 2 theories have evolved during the time period of human relations movement, and the focus is the during 20th century, the time period, the type 2 theories have evolved, and they are critics of classical theories. Their focus is on human behavior, employee motivation, and social needs. Neoclassical management or type 2 theories emphasizes on human element in management. Social factors and employee emotions influence productivity. Their sub-theories, which have dominated during the time period, are social and psychological factors which have influenced the worker productivity, employees' performance. This has been proposed by Elton Mayo and his associates. Behavioral movements, theories of motivation, management styles like Theory X and Theory Y, and group dynamics have also evolved during this time period. Type 3 theories, which have been considered as part of modern management theory, they have evolved during the time period of mid 20th century onwards, and their perspective is organization is like a complex system, and the best management approach is dependent on the situations. It includes combination of metaphors including organism, political system and culture metaphor. Their focus is on adaptability, technology, and integration of internal external factors in the environment. Sub theories during this time period which have created a dominance. These are systems approach to management treats organization as an interrelated set of parts interacting with the external environment as discussed earlier. Like external environment consists of task environment or specific environment and general environment. So customers, suppliers, political pressure groups, public pressure groups, all are part of task environment which have a role to play in the organization's performance. Pestle factors like political, economic, socio-demographic factors, technology and legislations also play an important role in the performance or continuity of an organization. Contingency theory, there is no best way to manage an organization. Most effective approach depends on specific situation, context and internal and external factors. Then there is a focus on multivariate approach or socio-technical systems theory, which integrates human and technical factors, recognizes interaction of social and technical subsystems. Moving forward, type 4 theories, the quantitative management theory or type 4 theories, this has evolved during the time period of 1950s and 70s, and they use mathematical and statistical methods to optimize allocation of resources in solving problems. Data driven decision making, efficiency, optimization, resource optimization are these keywords which have evolved during this time period, and their emphasis is on evidence based management. Perspectives are organization as a brain or learning system which emphasizes on information processing, data gathering and taking decisions based on the information. So, political, it also takes views of organization as a political system. The theories which have evolved during this time period are management science perspective, mathematical models to solve complex problems, operations management, quantitative techniques to improve productivity and quality in operations. Because as the world has become more competitive, the organizations just cannot survive based on innovative products, but they also need to address to improving productivity through quality initiatives. So their focus is on quality improvement. Now, discussing how these four types of organizational theories are related to organizational metaphors. The type 1, type 2, type 3, and type 4 organizational theories can be understood through the lens of organizational metaphors, a concept which is heavily influenced by management theorists like Gareth Morgan during his research in 1997. And all the theories of organizations are built on implicit or explicit metaphors that shape how we perceive and understand them. Each of the four types of theories can be associated with the core metaphor. So, summarizing the discussion here, we have discussed about the evolution of management theories and management thoughts. The type 1 theories, mostly the discussion is on the classical view of management or classical theories. There are three streams mostly dominant during the classical theory of management, that is scientific management proposed by Frederick Winslow Taylor during 1910, bureaucracy or bureaucratic theory of management of Max Weber during 1900s, and process management theory or administrative theory of management given by Henry Fayol during 1910s. Then type 2 theories or the neoclassical theories, human relations theory proposed by Mayo and Roethlisberger 1930s. Behavioral science theory talks about Maslow's and McGregor during 1940s. Type 3 theories, which is part of modern management theory, emphasizes on organization environment theory with systems with specific emphasis on systems approach, contingency approach, multivariate approach and socio-technical systems theory. Type 4 theory, which is also part of the modern management theory or management science theory, it talks about operations research, management information systems, operations management, total quality management, empowerment, and re engineering. So, now the type 1 classical theory, as we will discuss further, the dominant metaphor is machine metaphor. The perspective is organization is like a machine and the focus is on efficiency, control, standardized procedures. Employees are viewed as parts designed to perform specific or repetitive tasks. Mechanical view emphasizes on formal structures, rules, and top down management. Type 2 theories, neoclassical or behavioral theory, which has adopted the metaphor of organism metaphor. The perspective is organization is like a living organism, need to adapt and survive to its environment. The focus is on importance of social and psychological needs. Employees are not just cogs in the machine, but they have feelings, they understand relationship with each other and motivation. They are guided by inner motives, like as proposed by Abraham Maslow, so that affect productivity of an individual. There is shift in focus to teamwork, communication, and informal social systems. So it talks about organization is like a social system. Then type 3 theory, which is part of a modern management theory, it talks about a combination of metaphors like organism, political system, and culture metaphor, and explaining the relationship. The modern management theory, organizations are highly complex systems interacting with multiple constituencies. The systems view or systems perspective uses organism metaphor, organizations as open systems interacting with the environment. Contingency theory uses a combination of metaphors that uh, the best approach depends on the situation. It talks about the organization response as per the situational demands. Multivariate approach or socio-technical systems theory, where the organization uh, is like interacting with the social as well as the like individuals and the technical systems. Organization as a political system recognizes competing interests of groups. There are people who are working in the organization, and their own interest or their dominant interest will help in or interfere in the decision making or performance. Organization as a cultural system, it accounts for shared values, beliefs, and rituals that shape the behavior of the behavior. The focus is on the focus of this theory is on adaptability, technology adaptation, and integration of internal external factors. Type 4 theories, which focuses on quantitative theory, or which is also part of a modern management theory, it emphasizes on quantitative approach. The metaphor is learning brain or learning system. The dominant perspective is brain in or a learning system is continuously process information, acquire information, use of data and feedback loops for self-regulation and problem solving. Self-learning mirrors the function which is very similar to the function of a brain. It emphasizes on use of data and feedback loops to self-generate, self-regulate, and solve problems, which mirrors the function of a human brain. It emphasizes on organization's capacity to process information in order to adapt to change, and collective learning to respond to a complex, ever-changing business environment. Categorizing organizational theories based on related metaphors. So, type 1 theories, metaphor is machine metaphor and closed systems. Mechanical, it emphasizes on mechanical efficiency. The classical theories, the focus is on principles of managing organizations. How do we manage an organization? And theoretical foundation for structure, organizational structure and design. The theorists who have the proponents of the classical theories are Frederick Winslow Taylor, Elton Mayo, Max Weber, Ralph Davis. The type 2 theories, the metaphor which is being used to understand organizations is a living systems metaphor. And people, it talks about people and human relations. And unlike the type 1 theories, which emphasizes on mechanical or machine efficiency, the focus is on human efficiency. Neoclassical theories, the focus is on human behavior, its employee motivation, and organization as a social system. The proponents of this neoclassical theories are Elton Mayo, Chester Barnard, Douglas MacGregor, Warren Bennis, and it also talks about the death of bureaucracy. Type 3 theories, dominant metaphor discussed in this case is the open systems view. Talks about contingency designs of an organization, contingency designs or the factors which play an important role in organizations and its environment. Dominant metaphor is open systems view of an organization and it emphasizes on contingency designs. Modern management, a combination of metaphors including organism, political systems, and culture. The focus is on dynamic open systems interacting with the environment or the contingencies, the factors in the environment. Type 3 theories are Herbert Shimon and their principles of backlash, Kaz and Kahn's environmental perspective, the case of technology, Ashton Group, and organizational size. So it talks about organization size, technology, strategy has an important role to play in organizations' effectiveness. Type 4 theories, the dominant metaphor are brain learning systems, political systems, and it emphasizes on mathematical and statistical analysis and the mathematical and statistical models. The management science perspective has been discussed here. Their focus is on mathematical and statistical analysis and developing statistical models to understand the organizational realities. It emphasizes on data and feedback for solving problems, information processing, adaptation, and collective learning approach to respond to a complex and ever changing dynamic business environment. The type 4 theorists are March and Shimon. Cognitive limits to rationality prefer organizations as a political arena. So, type 4, the focus of type 4 theorists is mathematics and statistical models, analysis for decision making, and their proponents are March and Shimons. They emphasize on cognition, the role of cognition in decision making, rational decision making. Modern management theory is an integration of classical, social, behavioral science concepts. Organizations as dynamic, open systems adapt to change. Their reliance on empirical data, conceptual analytical base, systems of mutually dependent variables, individuals and personality structures, formal organizational structures, informal organizations, physical settings of the job, status and role patterns, and all the parts are interrelated. They work together to achieve organizational goals. There is emphasis on communication, decision making, integration of individual and organizational interest. Amalgamation of contingency theory, decision making, systems, and other theories. Distinguishing features of the modern management theory is probabilistic and non-deterministic. As a result, these are uncertain and depends on chance of occurrence. There is emphasis on multivariate, that is cause and effect relationship, a combination of several variables which have encompassed multi-level, multi-dimensional aspect of organizations, including internal and external environment. However, there is also limitation. There are blends of several theories like systems theory, contingency theory, decision making, so does not offer a framework to be applied to all organizations. Impact of organizations and its environment is discussed in organization environment theory. The organization environment theory is a set of forces and conditions that operate beyond an organization's boundary but affect a manager's ability to acquire and utilize resources. How they are able to distribute or acquire resources, it depends on various factors. The approach defines organization as a system and also considers the impact of environment on its effectiveness. This theory has three approaches. One is systems view or systems approach, contingency approach, and multivariate approach. Now let us just highlight on what is a systems approach. The approach is based on the view that an organization is like an open system composed of interrelated and interdependent elements. The organization is an open and adaptive system interacting with its own environment, with environment influencing the structure, adaptability, that is response to change, efficiency and effectiveness, emphasis on human values, There is emphasis on interrelationship and interdependency of the subsystems, integration of and coordination of all subsystems in the total system. There is attention being paid towards overall effectiveness of the system rather than effectiveness of the subsystem. So, modern management theory in an industrial organization as an open system consists of inputs, drawing resources like raw materials, labor, capital, and human capital. Then processing, there is a process of the processing the raw materials through the code transformation process into finished goods through regulations, lobbying, there are government norms and regulations. Then output of the finished goods is finally consumed by the consumers. But during the mechanism, there are legislations, repayment of loans, which is dealt by the financial institutions. Labor force is governed by the wage laws. Suppliers are managed by the payment of creditors, payment to creditors. So, discussing about the open closed dichotomy of organizations, there are relevant ways of looking at closed open dichotomy to consider a range rather than a separate classification, explaining the degree to which a system is closed or open with the respect to contact with environment. Let us discuss the case of General Motors, how it has operated in a closed system since inception since 1960s. Management decided the products to be sold to customers and continued the strategy for years. However, consumer advocates groups has less influence. General manager continued to be insulated from the environment. However, the action of consumer groups, stockholders, government regulators, and foreign competition has forced General Motors to be responsive to its environment, thus making it more open today than it was 30 years ago. Contingency approach assumes that there is no one best to manage. However, environment impacts the organization and managers must be flexible to react to the changes in the business environment. The way the organization is designed, controlled, systems selected depend on the environment. As technology changes rapidly, so managers must change accordingly. The salient features are situational factors play an important role in the design of structures and a suitable management style. Determinants are size of the organization, bigger the size, higher is the complexity, free flow of communication is required. So, these are important contingencies of companies like government, economy, geography, demography, culture, and technology. Then we focus on the multivariate approach. This is modification of contingency approach, which views organizations consisting of four interacting variables like task, structure, technology, and people. So, this the focus of multivariate approach is change in any one variable automatically produces a change in other variable. These are all interdependent and the interacting variables are task or basic business, structure, systems of authority, workflow and communication technology, tools and equipments, people and their behavior. Change can effectively begin in any one variable. If technology improves, there is a need to change people skills and organizational structure and task will also change. So if people are reoriented, structure, task and technology will also change. So there are four dominant components. One is task, structure, technology and people in a multivariate approach to organizational theory. Socio-technical systems theory of multivariate approach gives an overview of organizational psychology, socio-technical systems, examines human behavior and cognition in the work. With a dual focus on performance and well-being, the most of the organizational psychologists or researchers they focus on people and neglect contextual aspects of work such as processes and technology. Benefit of applying organizational psychology is that it considers the human behavior at a very earlier stage in the development of new system and redesign existing systems used during the 20th century. The foundation of a multivariate approach lies in the work of UK's Tavistock Institute of Human Relations during 1950s. It has been proposed by Emery and Trist, the role of socio-technical systems theory. Psychologists have examined the teamwork of miners during the technical processes of coal extraction, and they have focused on the human and technical aspects of work, have continued through 1960s in conceptualization of organization as a system comprising of people interacting with task, technology and structure, and proposed effective systems designed such as ailing a system with its objectives, ensuring it facilitates desired behavior and provides timely and targeted information. The framework of socio-technical systems theory conceptualizes work as a complex system comprising of both socio elements, that means people, culture and goals, and technical elements, uh, technology, infrastructure and processes, which is part of the modern management theory. Implications of the socio-technical systems theory in predictive analytics. It helps in developing the predictive capability to improve performance of complex systems involving both human and technical factors. Human factors are like people, culture, and goals. The social factors, it talks about how human and technical factors play an important role in the complex system. And for example, in aerospace, developing simulation capability for jet engines requires contribution from several engineering disciplines which understands the behavior of technical systems and subsystems and computer scientists with computational expertise. Thus, developing a predictive capability for complex socio-technical system requires application of organizational psychology as a design science to harness the understanding of human cognition, human behavior in work environment. What is the implication of socio-technical systems theory? Technical systems do not always result in higher productivity or effectiveness if the social system is not supportive. The use of work groups as the basic building block for work design can give organization the ability to meet demands of the environment or social and technical components. The socio-technical systems theory have been applied in the development of self-regulating work groups. Self-regulating work groups can control members' task behavior. They are responsible for whole product or service that can make decisions about task assignments and work methods. The group sets its own production goals with broader organizational limits and may be responsible for support service like maintenance, purchasing, quality control. So, socio-technical systems theory in analysis of complex organizational problems, it helps in understanding the people, shortage of skilled manpower, reliance on the self-assessment and self-declaration, inadequate standards of people, outcome-based performance focused on bureaucratic and financial targets. It again emphasizes on the culture, like if there is an open culture, transparent culture with key stakeholders, the focus of financial goals and targets, what is the tolerance of poor standards in the organization's culture, denial of concerns and defensiveness in reaction to the criticism, how they are accepting criticism, culture of top down approach of managers. All these have an impact on solving organizational problems. Then, if the technology is that whether it is crude measures focusing on financial control or lack of sophisticated tools to enforce standards, no tools to monitor feedback of quality, then infrastructure, what is the kind of infrastructure support, like general lack of engagement with the engagement, complexity and size, how whether many stakeholders are there or not, organizations where they are operating in silos or they're working in coordination with others, how is the process, whether there is positivity, inadequate transfer of information, where there is a frequent flow of information, whether there is a feedback mechanism which is working in the system to improve its efficiency, and whether there is a bureaucratic process which is hindering the hindering organization's performance, and what is the concern of organization towards goals, what is the focus on quality, then how they deal with the finance and targets other goals, like what is the level of standards which are being followed by the organizations. So to summarize the discussion here, The focus of socio-technical systems theory is lying on the success of people, technology, infrastructure, process, goals, and culture. Modern management theory, the quantitative techniques to maximize resources, primarily focus on this approach is the mathematical model. Management science visualizes management as a logical entity, actions of which can be expressed in terms of mathematical symbols, relationship, and measurement data. Managerial problems can be expressed in basic relationship where the goal is sought and the model interest to optimize the goal. The approach draws many things from the decision theory approach and provides many techniques for rational decision making. Key features are quantitative management, utilizes linear programming models, simulation systems, operations management techniques to analyze aspects of production systems. TQM focuses on quality improvement, management information system, it talks about information processing and decision making. Management science or quantitative techniques, the operations research used to improve decision making, evolved from the mathematical and statistical solutions developed during the Second World War, the military to solve the military problems. It gained popularity through development of high speed computers, implementation of this approach at Ford Motor Company. This approach contributes to management decision making in the areas like budgeting, queuing, scheduling, quality control, etc. And now, summarizing the discussion here, the focus we have discussed at length about various metaphors of organizations as proposed by Gareth Morgan. We have also come to a discussion on the various theories of management and how these metaphors have been incorporated in the type 1, type 2, type 3 and type 4 theories. Type 1 theorists relied heavily on simplistic and universal principles, developing models of organizations which are rational and mechanistic. Type 2 theorists to a large degree represented a counterpoint to the rational mechanistic view. The focus moved away from division of labor, centralized authority towards democratic organizations. Human factor moved to the center stage of the type 2 theory between 1930s and 60s. The current state of organizational theory reflects contribution of type 3 and type 4 theorists. Contingency theorists have identified contingency variables that are most important to determine the right structure. Political perspectives taken by type 4 theories, which builds on our knowledge of behavioral decision making and political science, has improved ability to explain organizational phenomena that contingency advocates rational assumptions has been overlooked. So, describing the neoclassical, classical, modern management theories, management science and organizational theory into type 1, type 2, type 3 and type 4 theories respectively. These typologies these typologies have evolved with different time period and they have helped managers understand the organization and the complexities associated with each phase of evolution. They have also helped managers to take decisions so that organizations become sustainable and efficient. There is an evolution of management theory from the era of 1900s with the focus on efficiency of production as proposed by Frederick Winslow Taylor. During the scientific management era 1960s, the focus is on management functions by Henry Fayol. Then further moving forward is human relations management, which focuses on the Hawthorne studies need hierarchy theory by Abraham Maslow, social systems approach by Bernard, and they have their time period was 1930s 19 to 1954. Further, there is a organizational structure by Henry Mintzberg, theory X and theory Y. Then there is a focus on learning organization by Peter Senge during 1990s. Then 2000s to 2010 onwards, there is a disruptive change, and then focus shifted towards responsible management and sustainable development by Kuhlman and Farrington. So, continuation of management thoughts, they have evolved over a period of time from scientific management, human relations, complexity, and responsible management. The focus has shifted from efficiency of production, economy of movement, principles of management, rules and procedures to the reciprocal relationship, group relations, need for people and human nature, social relations in the workplace, towards open systems, complex systems, adaptability, continuous innovation, and finally moving towards sustainability, green organizations, balancing tasks. To summarize the discussion here, what as an executive we should remember, what executives should remember is the theory of the business, managing for business effectiveness, what businesses can learn from the non-profits, the theory of society and organization, the information executives truly need managing oneself, and they are not employees, they are people, what makes an effective executive. So all these can be explored by connecting with the theory of business, like theory of business, the images which we have acquired from the strategy, the management challenges for 21st century, communication and test assumptions, Drucker's philosophy on effective the victims of success, fortunes, top 500 companies, a mission and importance. Financial results are not the purpose, ability to convert change into opportunity. But this will only work if the enterprise is also managed for continuity and has at the foundation a clear concept of its mission. Then finally, all these will lead towards developing or managing the challenges in the 21st century. Management will understand the new paradigm, the strategy and its new certainties, how we can emphasize on change leaders, the information challenges, how we can tackle with the information challenges, the focus on knowledge worker and his or her productivity. So, the understanding the dynamics of organizations and its complexities, and learning the theories from the various theories, or the type 1, type 2, type 3 and type 4 theories, will help a manager to efficiently manage the complexities and make a sustainable organization. Thank you.